You're good. Well, Marcus, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Really pumped to have you. Everybody who's listening or watching, Marcus Philly, four-time CrossFit Games athlete. He's an entrepreneur, and really, I found you on Instagram at some point. I'm sure going. We were just talking about this before we started, but really going down the Instagram hole one day, getting into health and fitness. I came across you. So do you mind giving everyone a little intro into you, and we'll kick it off?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a decent intro. If people have seen me or they know of me, then it's likely through the either the CrossFit world and ecosystem, or they're just followers of online fitness, and maybe they've seen some of the recent functional bodybuilding stuff that I've done. But yeah, I mean, I there's not much outside of that other than I came up with a passion and a desire to pursue health and wellness, or health and fitness, I suppose. But it took me down the path of going to medical school. So I was like a
Yeah.
pre-med undergrad, medical school applicant, matriculated into medical school in 2008 rather, and spent just over 1 year in medical school before leaving to pursue a career in health and fitness, more the traditional gym, working one-to-one with people model. And I got my start in really a CrossFit gym local to where I grew up. And then from there, a lot of things just sort of unfolded through my passion for health and fitness, and also athletics too. I mean, I became a CrossFit athlete, secondary to being interested in developing as a professional in fitness, as a coach. And then 10 years, 11 years later, I'm still doing this full time and have my own business that I'm, again, trying to spread the message of health, fitness, longevity, and sort of just like, I'm somebody who's gotten really, really granular on different topics, specific things, tried to learn as much as I can through the dedication and the commitment to doing something to the best of my ability. And then now I'm like, okay, let me zoom out. Let me take a broader look at what do people actually need to get better, and apply all the stuff I've learned for the last 20 years in fitness and nutrition so that they can, wade through some of the BS and some of the dogma that's out there, and take it for what it really, is. It's like, this is a useful tool. It's not the only way, but here's why it's useful. And, choose your own adventure.
Right. No, I love that. When you were backing up just a little bit, when you were bringing up medical school, that seems like a lot of people that I know who are in medical school also seem to have, I know a decent amount of people who have a interest in health and fitness, but seems like a huge pivot to make, especially if you're like investing your time in pre-med and wanting to go into med school. Do you remember going through that? What was kind of like the pivotal things that kind of spun you to leave medical school and go down a more, health fitness one-on-one type route?
I definitely had an interest in the health and fitness world as like the end game for, this is how you deliver healthcare.
Okay.
Before I ever went to medical school. So that was an important thing to note, is that I didn't just I wasn't like, I'm going to be a surgeon. I can't wait to go to medical school. I've been dreaming this my whole life. This is what I want to do. And then, halfway through my first year, I was like, oh, maybe I should try exercise, like that. It didn't happen that way for me. What happened was that I fell in love with health and fitness, and I was good at all of the things as a student that people would say you should do. You should consider medicine, or you should consider, graduate school in the sciences. And medical school was the one that sort of jumped out to me, because I had I had family members that were all in health, in traditional healthcare medicine practice, brothers, grandfather, father, mother, people that were like the system.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, you're good at sciences, consider a graduate level education in science. because my two brothers, or my brother and my father, my grandfather, all had done that. Um, Plus that was kind of like, okay, you're a good student, you know, you should probably just pursue higher education. That's like a good path to a future career, whatever. Um, and so that was why I went the medicine route. But it was very much inspired by the fact that I knew and I had learned before I ever got to medical school that, and this was, I guess you could, okay, 2002 to 2006 is when I was in undergrad at Berkeley, and I'm studying a lot of physiology and nutrition. I'm applying things that were just totally groundbreaking things at the time through my own practice.
Oh,
Right? I'm
yeah.
reading online publications that are teaching people about how to be healthy, and they're talking about not eating processed carbohydrates, high protein, high fat diets are better. Doing resistance training instead of cardio is like a better path to longevity and health and fat loss. Like, remember back then, like, people might not know this, but back then, this is like different stuff. Now
Yeah.
it's a lot more mainstream, but this is way different. And it goes against all the exercise physiology textbooks that I was reading at Berkeley, the authors of
Really?
which were my teachers. It was like exercise physiology and how to like eat for nutrition. It was like they were like spouting off food pyramid stuff. It was crazy. It was like, you got to do cardiovascular exercise. I remember getting into arguments, not arguments, but being like in a discussion with a professor and being like, hey, like, what's wrong with high protein? Like, if I eat 200 grams of protein a day, what's wrong with that? And he was like, your kidneys are going to fail, all this. It's like, you shouldn't do that. And I was like, looking to my buddy Matt, who's like my other brainy kind of science friend who lifts weights with me. And he's like, this guy's an idiot. Like, that's just not true. He's like,
Oh,
I'm like,
wow.
Matt, what do you think about what he's saying? He's like, so we're learning this stuff by way of Charles Poliquin and Paul Chek and, authors on tnation.com. And we're applying the principles. We're doing it. And I'm like, okay, there's so much here. There's so much that we're like going to learn. And there's so much that we have the power to like basically change how people's health is
Yeah.
through their actions. And, that was motivating to me. I was like, I'm going to go to medical school. It's like almost like medical school was just in the brain, like you're gonna do it because
Okay.
everyone said you're supposed to do it.
Sure.
I never questioned it. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go. But what I did start to question was like, I'm not gonna go and be a general practitioner that just, pushes medicines on people and sees them for 5 minutes and tells them like, eat better, eat more carbs, less
Yeah.
fat, and
Right.
here's,
The
some
pyramid stuff.
blood pressure. Yeah, here's some blood pressure medicine. I was like, no, I'm gonna go and I'm going to get my MD, but we're going to change the game on how we approach health and health and
Oh, that's
wellness.
cool. Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
going to do preventative stuff. And then I got into the system and I was like, whoa, this is a tough system to be a part of. Making change is not going to be easy. And I'm 10 years out from being able to actually practice
That's the
any
tough
type
part
of
too.
medicine.
Yeah.
And I'm 24. Like, do I want to just, I'll get out when I'm 32 and, maybe if I haven't been like totally had the inspiration and the, motivation, beat out of me, I'll hopefully make a change. Like, where are things going to be then? This is a
Yeah.
critical time. Like, I don't want to miss this powerful time. And this was also when CrossFit was trying to, was growing in a new way and getting people to engage in a conversation that I was desperate to have people engaged in, which was resistance training, moving your body, eating paleo, getting off the carbs. Like, they were doing it every
Yeah.
day. And I'm like, I'm just trying to go to school for 8 years so that I can get out and hopefully get people to do what they're, like banging on the doors at CrossFit gyms to do. I was like,
Yeah.
huh, I
Right.
might be in the wrong place.
Well, it's interesting because it sounds like time. I mean, you hear this all the time, but sometimes timing's everything. It seems like, yeah, you kind of were going through a pivotal part of your life and making a decision at a pivotal time in health and fitness, really, if you look back in the
Yes.
grand scheme of that timeline. How did you, so did you kind of, did you start hearing about CrossFit, but you weren't necessarily doing CrossFit? And then how'd you transition into like the CrossFit? Was that kind of like the kick in the butt to like go check out CrossFit and maybe get involved with that?
Yeah, there was a really interesting 2-year period of my life from the moment I graduated from college in 2006 to when I started medical school in 2008. So it was
Okay.
like almost exactly 2 years. I took I took a leave of, well, first off, I didn't apply to medical school until my senior year, whereas most of my classmates applied junior year so that they could, get an acceptance and then just move right in. So I was like,
Okay.
look, I need to take at least a year to sort of get some space from this whole thing, because I was like, there's a lot happening in my life. I've never slowed down to kind of try a different route, or, I was like, I'm going to take a gap year, right?
Yeah.
Which a lot of people
Got it.
talk about, and foreign, Canadians and Europeans do this. But um, I then, in that time, also had subsequently decided to, I applied and then I deferred my enrollment to medical school so I could have another full year. So I basically bought myself 2 years. And in that 2 years, I traveled a lot internationally to a bunch of foreign countries to gain some perspective, to just be in different cultures, to get out of the normal routine. I worked in a couple of different industries here near my home where I grew up. And I also kept pursuing fitness. So like I had a big fitness background and a competitive athletic background through college, but things started to shift. I mentioned already, like I was training in a new way. I was lifting weights. I was following some protocols that were, a lot more strength conditioning focused than your traditional bodybuilding stuff. I was learning a lot.
Mhm.
And so I was always on the search for like new fitness ways to consume fitness, like to learn about fitness. And it just so happened that in 2006, 7, right after that college period, I was training with this group of individuals around here at the local gym, and one of them happened to live in San Francisco, just down the street from what was, from what was then San Francisco CrossFit. And it
Oh
was
yeah.
this outdoor parking lot type of, fitness thing. And she was
Right.
like, oh yeah, I go to these CrossFit classes and it's like in this parking lot, you should come with me. And it was like the third time I had heard the term CrossFit kind of pop up. And because I was friends with her, I was like, sure, let's go, So I went, and that was like kind of my first intro to CrossFit. I had a class like the day I arrived. It was a class that was led by, the kind of well-known Kelly Starrett, the owner
Oh
of the
yeah. Nice.
gym, very charismatic, owner of the Ready State. And it really like hit something inside of me. I was like, wow, this is pretty special. So I kind of dabbled in his classes, and then, looked at the website CrossFit.com and sort of consumed as much as I could in that 2 year period.
Okay. Got it.
So I was getting exposure to it, but then I went to medical school, and I was like at the, Ohio State University, Columbus, Ohio,
Oh yeah.
Midwest,
Midwest.
totally like, California kid, just sort of didn't know what was going to hit him at all.
Right. Yeah.
And I was just like forced to kind of figure out what was, what to do with my fitness while I was there, because time demands were huge. I was training at the school gym, CrossFit at the time. I mean, people think of Columbus, Ohio now, and it's synonymous with like Rogue Fitness. Rogue Fitness
Yeah.
is built out of basically like downtown Columbus. It's a massive, massive enterprise that is, proud to be, Ohio made, right? At the time when I was at medical school, Rogue Fitness, or CrossFit Gahanna, was about a 40-minute drive from campus, and it was nothing. I mean, it was not nothing. It was a small gym. They didn't
Oh,
have,
okay. Yeah.
and
I didn't know that.
there were no CrossFit gyms in Columbus proper at the time. So I was like, I don't have time to drive 30, 40 minutes a day in each direction to go to a CrossFit workout. So I just did CrossFit in like the, the local, or in the school gym. And it was funny. It was like, I'm on the third floor using the rowing machine, and then I'd run downstairs and do some squats, and then I'd run back upstairs and get on the rowing machine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. So you got the bug for CrossFit and functional fitness. This is the question I always love to ask, someone like you, because I kind of went through the same thing. It was like, when did you, so you, did you notice, because you had a background in like physiology and nutrition and all that. Once you went to a CrossFit class, did you think it was goofy at first? Or did you think like, oh, this actually makes more sense to do this than like traditional bodybuilding? I know you like, we can get into it. Obviously, like your form of functional bodybuilding is a combination, but just always curious when people first get into CrossFit and then start actually practicing it, like the thought process behind like how it works and if it's, you know, a good or bad or mixed, you know, way
Sure.
of training.
Yeah. I kind of came from this standpoint of I had been exploring different fitness approaches for a while. And, I didn't consider you could find me in that period of time of my life. You could find me taking a spin class at Gold's Gym. You could find me taking the physio ball stability challenge at the gym. You could also find me over there squatting in the squat rack or doing leg presses. And then you could see me doing, curls in the by the dumbbell rack. Like
Got it.
I was all about doing all of it. And in college, I bought like a really cheap, street road bike. And in Berkeley, there's a
I was gonna
bunch of
say
hills,
that's
the
great
Berkeley hills.
spot.
And I would just go and ride around, like I'd ride in the hill. So I'd road bike, and I played soccer, and I had collegiate strength conditioning where we learned how to power clean and power snatch. And, I was a goalkeeper in college. So I was used to jumping and diving and, doing all the messy field work. And
Right.
so, I mean, there was nothing, and all of it was, I didn't look at every part of it as like, what's the best way? What's the right way to train? I was like, does this give me a feeling that I'm looking for with movement and fitness, which is, and it was like, when I was considering efficacy, it was like, it wasn't just like, did it help me lose body fat or gain muscle, but was it like, did I feel like I could express myself physically in a fun and, engaging way that produced some strength and had some physiological outcome that made me feel great,
Yeah. Okay.
both mentally and emotionally and, spiritually, physically, whatever. And all of those things that I mentioned could do that. Even the yoga classes that I took in college as part of like mandated from the soccer coach,
Yeah.
I was like, I got into that. It sucked that we had to wake up at 5:30 in the morning to go take these classes, but by the end of it, I was always excited and happy about it. So when I first got exposed to CrossFit, I had already been exposed to a lot of stuff. It wasn't mixing and mashing different like training concepts together wasn't totally new to me. Now, I hadn't done anything exactly like CrossFit for sure, but I had deadlifted, I had done sprints, I had jumped on boxes. And on the
Right.
first day of class, we kind of did all of that in the same workout. And I was like, oh, this totally makes sense. Plus, it was like super invigorating and it made me feel good. Granted, I had a massive training background already. So I came in with the prerequisite strength and like skills to do it. Whereas
Right.
most people that get CrossFit, uh, christened, don't have that. They come in
Yeah.
and they're like, whoa, I've never deadlifted before. And they made me, go ham on the first day. So, but that's when I experienced CrossFit for the first time. It was like, this makes a lot of sense. This is great. I wasn't, I was not like, you shouldn't put, heavy, you know, heavy hinging and sprinting, back to back, because that could ruin some strength adaptation. Or, I was not like I wasn't analyzing it from a academic standpoint or anything like that.
Got
I
it.
was in it for the experience.
Yeah.
And then of
Makes
course
sense.
the experiences over time led me to develop my own kind of belief systems and draw my own conclusions about how applicable this is to a broad audience. And that's how I look at everything in fitness. I'm like, everything has got merit. It's just,
Yeah. Right.
if I'm trying to educate, if I choose as a professional to want to educate this small little narrow group of people, then I'll do everything I can to figure out that what I'm teaching that small narrow group of people works for them. And it might get super specific, but I'm more interested in like reaching a broad audience. That was my goal from the beginning with the health and fitness thing and the healthcare thing. I was like,
Okay.
I'm going to go to medical school because I want to treat the general population. I don't want to become a super specialist. So if I'm looking at fitness from a broad spectrum, I need to again, I need to value like a lot of different methodologies that are out there and see that what are the merits of CrossFit for the broad audience? What are the merits of yoga for the broad audience? What are the merits of, you know, low level, long duration cardio for the broad audience? And what are the limitations of each of these things? And that's how I ended up, you know, kind of spending a lot of my time with CrossFit. Was I was an elite competitor, but always looking through the lens of like, how is this good for the general population? And I
Right.
absolutely
Okay.
arrived at, no, this is not good for the general population. Being an elite competitor in fitness is like saying, yeah, it's really good to play like NFL level football if you're just like an everyday dad. That's a good idea. Like
Got
put
it.
on pads and go run into other 300-pound men at your top speed. Like, who's going to recommend that to a guy who's in his mid 30s to, you know, mid 40s, has got 2 kids, and is trying to just live a balanced life? It's just,
Sure.
it's
I see what you're saying.
crazy.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you
yeah.
don't take a 40-year-old, you know, who's got 2 kids in a busy career, and you say, hey, you should go do this professional CrossFit thing 3 days a week. It's a really good idea. Go and train this super high intensity thing for 2 hours and crush yourself, because it's totally aligned with what you're doing. So that's, again, like, I know I just went on a bit of a rant, but it's
No, it was
like
great.
looking at each of these things through the lens of, okay, what's the value of it? Okay, deadlifts and sprints on the beach. That was my first CrossFit class. It was so fun, and it had so much utility for me, and I loved it. And I immediately saw the value. And then back up 10 years of experience. Should I be sending my mom out to the beach right now to do deadlifts and sprints in a group of 15 or 20 where I'm not confident, based upon the skill set of the coach, that she's going to get adequate instruction on how to do this in a way that is safe enough to offset the potential benefits that she might get? Right?
Got it.
That's a
Okay.
lot of
Yeah.
questions
Yeah,
to
yeah,
pack
yeah,
up into
yeah, yeah.
one quick decision.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, and that seems like it's a pretty common feedback, of CrossFit in general. And then, obviously I think a lot of people go straight to, scaling and just changing to simpler movements. But I always wonder, to your point, I mean, I know a lot of people also who have gotten into CrossFit. And I mean, I don't know, I guess myself, like I've actually never done a class, like I've never actually been to a box and done a class. I have a
Yeah,
garage gym though, and I've set it up to do like CrossFit functional movements really mostly.
sure.
Um, but it's interesting because then I also know a whole ton of people who got really into CrossFit, got really hurt, and then have not done it again. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to me to hear your perspective on it, because I think that must be, people get really into it and maybe get too into it and aren't ready. It can hurt themselves. So it's interesting because I think there's lots of
Yeah.
different perspectives. But then, so for you, then I know obviously you got into it. Obviously got competitive. Was that on purpose, or were you just like standing out in your class and decided you
Hmm.
maybe wanted to compete? How did you actually get to be a competitive CrossFit athlete? Because I think a lot of people
Yeah.
listening do functional fitness, and I think there's a big gap between just getting into it and doing the movements and the metcons and
Sure.
everything to
Yeah.
actually like getting to the competitive level.
Yeah. Well, nowadays it's quite different, you know, than it used to be.
Yeah.
I know you've interviewed people like Matt Fraser, and you know he came on the scene in 2000, and I guess his first games was 2014.
Yeah, I think it was 14, right?
Um, so in 2013 he kind of had started. All right, that was
Yeah, yeah,
about
it was
4
like I think
years.
yeah, he had like a year of like I'm
Yeah.
gonna which yeah.
So, but that's like 4 years after I kind of entered the scene. And the difference was that, like, at that point, there was like the Reebok CrossFit
Yeah.
games, there
Yeah.
was televised CrossFit games, there was, you know, a prize purse that was like, you know, it was enticing to somebody. And there was an actual season to the CrossFit sport,
Yes,
right?
right, right.
Um, Now, fast forward another 5 or 6 years, again, it's like just more of a structure to the sport. And when there's more structure to a sport, there's more dollars in the sport, there's more sponsorships and incentives as an athlete to be a part of it. Then you start to get people that are like, hey, I want to go do that sport.
Yeah.
But when I started in 2009, there was a barbecue 2008, 2007, there was a barbecue at the ranch where people got together and kind of threw down. And it was like, come
That's
show
so
us what you're
cool.
made of. It wasn't like a
Yeah.
sport, right? So
Yeah.
I didn't get into it like, oh, I want to become a CrossFit athlete. There was no such
I was
thing
say
as a
there wasn't like a
CrossFit athlete.
thing, right?
No, no,
That didn't
there were
exist.
CrossFitters that were there were business owners. There were CrossFit business owners that kind of had like the edge because they technically got to spend all day in the gym. Whereas,
Yeah.
right. And
Yeah, it
so
makes
that was
sense.
kind of the dream. It was like, I wanted to be like in the gym, coaching people and then getting to express myself physically through workouts throughout the day. And that was kind of the lifestyle I wanted to have.
Okay.
So
Is
that's,
that, not
and
to cut you off, but is that where
yeah,
you think, because one thing as I got into like learning about CrossFit, I thought it was really interesting to understand how, like at the top level, how much these guys and girls train. Like
yes.
I mean, it's morning, usually an afternoon session, and evening.
Yeah,
Like there's like usually like 3 times a day for a lot of these people that they have like legitimate, what
sure.
would be an intense training session once a day for the normal person
Yeah.
is like they're doing this 3 times a day for the most part, a lot of days a week.
Yeah.
Is
Well,
that kind of
that's
maybe where
also
that started? Was that just like,
no,
because
no, no, no.
no?
That has evolved so much in the last
Okay.
12 years. 13 years to be exact to when the first CrossFit Games started. So there's been 13 of them. And this notion of volume training, like you're describing, really started with I think the first athlete to really, even if you go back far enough, there's a guy named Miko Salo who won the CrossFit Games in 2009. And he was the first individual to show up at the CrossFit Games and win. He was like kind of a no, like somebody people didn't know,
Yeah.
an unknown. And then when they evaluated his training methods, it was clear like, oh, this guy does a lot of volume
Oh, okay.
relative to the other CrossFit athletes.
Yeah.
So most CrossFit athletes up until that point had really stuck to the CrossFit kind of doctrine, which is like high intensity, constantly varied, like, you're doing 1 or 2 WODs a day, but you're going all out versus Miko, he did WODs, but he really did a ton of volume. He ran, he did long endurance, he did pretty long weight training sessions. He did Metcons, he did all of that within a day.
Ah,
And nobody was really like training in that way prior to that. So then he kind of shows up, and then this other guy, Rich Froning, gets on the scene, and he's just like a total fitness junkie,
yeah.
essentially. He
Okay.
just wants to work out all day, and he basically sets up his life to do that. And he does CrossFit all day, which if you're really doing like the highest levels of intensity in performance training, then there's the more intensity, the less volume you can tolerate.
Yeah.
So Rich kind of like lowered his intensity a little bit and just did the most massive amount of volume that anybody had ever seen, and people were just like blown away by that. And
Got it.
that
Okay.
became the norm as the years progressed, to a point now which like, to be a competitive CrossFitter, you need to put in a tremendous amount of volume, and over time you kind of raise your capacity for like raising intensity,
Yeah.
because when an event like the CrossFit Games comes around, or one of the sanctional events, you have to endure a lot of contractions over a whole weekend or 4 days, and therefore you need a big training base and a big volume base to do that. So that's very different. And when I was starting out, I would train once a day, and that was it. Like,
Okay. Got it. Yeah.
this notion of doing like 3 sessions, so the business owner,
Wild.
CrossFit
Okay.
coach,
Yeah.
and CrossFit athlete, you could kind of do it all back then,
Yeah.
because it wasn't like a 6 hour a day training endeavor.
Yeah.
Whereas
Right.
now, to be in the top of the sport, you have to train a lot. You cannot just do a single session a day and think you're going to make it to the CrossFit Games. Granted that can change like in the off season versus in season, but it's a whole different commitment level now than it used to be.
Got it. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So that's cool. That's cool to hear that. I haven't never actually like just walked through that evolution of the sport. For you, and then obviously, like I said at the beginning, 4-time CrossFit Games athlete. You finished 12th in 2016, which is I think that was your highest finish ever, right? What was that year like? So that was kind of at that point, I mean, CrossFit was definitely that was becoming like a mainstream thing, and it
Sure.
was
Yeah.
televised, and it was, big arena, the whole thing. What was that like competing?
Yeah. I mean, that's something I will, there's kind of like the old era and the new era of the sport.
Yeah.
And I think around 2014, 15 is when it started to shift. And so to be able to compete and be successful before and then continue to compete and be successful after that shift, to me was sort of like, okay, I've seen this sport obviously, or through a big evolution.
Yeah.
Now, granted, if I would go back and compete today, and if I could be, it's now gone up another notch, but my competitive career in the open division of like athlete ages is way beyond me. It's gone. 2016 was a special year. It was that 10-year anniversary of the CrossFit Games, and they kind of pulled out a lot of extra you know excitement factor. They flew us up to the CrossFit Ranch.
Yeah.
From Southern California, kind of unexpectedly. We got to play in the big soccer stadium down at the StubHub Center, which is the last time that they had held it there. There was just a lot of cool things that happened that year, and it was it was pretty clear to me it was likely going to be my last big push and big year to compete, because my wife was pregnant and the next year we were going to have a baby, and my business was changing, so there was a lot changing. So it was like,
Yeah.
okay, this is kind of my last year to just be all in on training. I don't need to do anything else. I can sort of be 100% focused on this. Whereas next year it's going to be focus on family, focus on different things.
Yeah.
So I really just, I just soaked up all the parts of it. I was like very aware that I was living a very unique experience, getting to train most days without any obligations or any responsibilities. I had literally just sold my shares in my CrossFit affiliate to
Oh, wow.
back to my partners. And I
Okay.
was kind of a free agent. I was like coaching some clients online. They were my former partners were sort of like paying me a monthly, like, sort of settlement for my shares. So I was like, I had a little income going. I was like, I just want to focus on doing as well as I can in CrossFit. And I was also peaking in terms of my physical abilities from essentially like a 2-year to 3-year focused effort in building myself as an athlete. So I
Got it.
got into the individual sport in 2013, coming off of being a part of the team sport, which are the two different kind of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, definitely.
And becoming, getting into the individual sport, I basically had like, some weaknesses I had to shore up as an athlete, which I spent the better part of 4 years trying to shore up. And here I was arriving in 2016, like, okay, this is the most complete package I've ever brought to the sport, and I'm ready. And this is like, I'm in a good mental space, and I've had a number of years of coming to the CrossFit Games as an individual and sort of getting some experience under my belt. I was the oldest competitor, uh, next to Josh Bridges, who is a couple years older than me. So
Yeah.
I felt like I was mature. Like, I'm like, I see young kids in there that were just like starry eyed, like, oh my God, I'm at the games. And I'm like,
Right. I'm
so
sure.
I was in a good position, and I just had like an absolute blast. What's interesting is like, I say that because at the end of the weekend, I was in 12th place, and I was like, thumbs up. Everything was great. Like, this was a great experience for me. But the first 2 days of competition were brutal. Like, I had fun in elements of it, but I was like down the leaderboard. I was not performing well, and everything was just like, this is it. I put all this time and energy, and I felt so good. And, here I am, like taking 35th place on workouts. Like, this is not okay.
Yeah, that would be
Um,
frustrating. I can only
and then
imagine.
I woke up on Saturday, and, my, I think my oldest brother texted me something. He's like, well, you got nothing to lose. Just get out there and win an event. And I was just like, it's like when, like, it's kind of like that piece of advice that you almost are like, it pisses you off. You're like,
Yeah.
dude, like, it's easy to go out and win an event. Like, come on.
Yeah,
And
yeah, 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 yeah.
first event of the day, I go out. It's this event at the soccer stadium. There's 40 athletes. They break them up into 2 heats. course, I'm in the lower half. So I go with the first 20 athletes and there's another 20 to come. Right.
Yeah. Right.
And in that first heat of 20, I win the heat and I'm like way ahead of everyone else. And I'm like, whoa, this is like, I've never won a heat at the CrossFit Games. I've
Sure.
been
Yeah.
here a
Right.
lot. This is
Yeah.
like totally new. I'm like, granted, someone's going to come and pass me on the next round, but hey, I'll take it for
For the
now.
moment,
Even if
I'm in
I
the
get,
lead. Yeah.
yeah. And then of course, like the next heat came and, 2 or 3 guys beat me, Brent Frykowski, Matt Fraser, and like one other person, but I was like fourth. It's
That's
like, oh my God, I got
crazy.
fourth in an event. Like
Yeah.
that's going to help me in the standings. Like I've never gotten a 70 point, bump in the
Yeah.
leaderboard. And then the next event, I went out and I got another fourth that day, another heat win that day. I was like, whoa, like something's going on, So I had like this epic day and then came back the following day, got another heat win. I'm like,
On
so
fire.
things
Yeah.
just like, fire ramped up in the last, 36 hours of the competition. And that's my memory of it. Right.
Which is
Not
the
the
best
first
way
2
to
days
finish.
where I got like the last place in the swim and I was like last place in the run at the ranch and like whatever, that's all gone. Like
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I crushed it on the last 2 days.
It's I think it's more important to finish strong than anything. So
Oh
I
yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's exciting. That's so cool, man. That's such a cool story. I know. I think which movie I was getting confused. I've watched that documentary of that year. I think there's
Yeah.
one out, right? Because yeah, I've watched that whole thing.
Yeah.
So cool. It's got to be, like you said, it's an experience that you'll always get to hold on to.
Oh yeah, for
And then
sure.
the next thing I wanted to bounce to was obviously, doing some research before this. I read a little bit about. Um, did you? I took away that you finally got to a point where obviously training at that level for that many years has got to be just tough on the body. Like, I mean, you guys are in
Yeah.
incredible shape to be competing at the games, but I'm sure from a longevity perspective, that's not an intensity and maybe even like weight that you can continue to do for a lifetime is my assumption.
Sure.
So is this then when you started to think like, is there a better way to train for longevity? And is this where the functional bodybuilding, which is what you've coined, is that kind of when it became a thing towards the end of your CrossFit career? I was just curious of
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
timing of that,
Precisely.
how you came up
Yeah.
with all that.
It was kind of like after I finished the 2016 season, I needed a little bit of a refresh in my body. I was like pretty beat down, pretty
Okay.
broken. I had a number of injuries and just anybody that's been through like a very, very intense physical build like the CrossFit Games or, multi-month, maybe a multi-year peak knows that on the other end of that peak, there's some like physiological fallout that
Yeah,
happens.
I'm sure.
Not just like, oh man, my shoulder's wonky, but like your whole energy system is off, the hormones are off, you're just like motivation, drive, like once the goal has been reached or you're beyond the goal, it's like
Yeah.
your
Well, I'm
body's
sure
like,
like just the
okay,
excitement and like just the build to get into the games after that, it's like, all right, what's next?
yeah,
I'm sure that's
ex-
a tough thing. I've run very different, but I've run a marathon. I remember like you just build up to, and then when you're done, you're like, okay, what am I going to go run a bunch of miles for now? It's like, it's
sure,
tough to get
yeah.
your mindset back into it.
Well, yeah, and if you've really invested a lot physically, we I just think of it this way: like we all have a certain capacity, and amount of energy stored in us.
Yeah.
However you
Okay.
want to define energy,
Sure.
you've just depleted all of that,
Right.
and now you get to the other side of it. The motivation's gone, the daily drive is gone, and your whole resilience, resource capacity tank is on empty. So nothing is functioning well. And that
Yeah.
was me for like many, many months. And I was like, okay, well, I don't have it in me to do any of the CrossFit stuff. Like I'm basically feeling like probably a lot of the general population feels every day from being poorly resourced because they don't eat well, they don't sleep well, they have a lot of stress in their life, and they don't have good habits. Okay, that's how I feel right now. It's
Yeah.
2016, it's October, and I want to get myself feeling better again. Matter of fact, I started training and lifting weights and doing fitness because it made me feel good.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Right.
CrossFit sport, you know, it can make me feel good in some ways, but as a tool to attack this new place that I find myself in, which is depleted, energy low, you know, the now stress of like, okay, I have a baby that's on the, you know, it's due in
Yeah.
3 months.
Oh yeah.
I have to like, now I can't just like, you know, it's not just this honeymoon phase. Like I gotta figure out how to build my next business, because the old business is gone. I need something that's more sustainable for me in terms of a fitness approach, which has always been at the center of me having a healthy lifestyle and a
Yeah.
health, and like just my well-being being there.
Got
Right.
it.
So that was where I needed to kind of, and I couldn't turn my back on CrossFit because it was just so ingrained in me. There were so many positive things that came from it. I love the movements. I love the idea of doing mixed modal conditioning. I love that I could build, you know, training programs that had cardio and weight training all blended together. Like, so it was going to stay there, but I also wanted to like fall upon my old training methods of like just getting into the gym and getting a pump, you know,
Yeah.
going
Yeah.